Good afternoon. Welcome to a very exciting installment of our virtual seminar Grove. We are very excited for today because we are joined again by the great Ben Holman and Richard Gertain, our production manager. Richard Gertain is going to be managing this conversation today, and we're going to hear from Ben. Now, those of you that attend the festival, you know Ben as that great man that every Monday and Thursday he talks about in his prop seminar the magic of making these props and putting together. And you got to see earlier the prop storage area, but you never got a chance to see where the actual magic happens, where they actually make these props. So I want to celebrate, first of all, who makes this possible. We're grateful to Cedar City, Bryan Head, and Tourism Bureau for making these possible. We would recommend that through this presentation, if you have any questions for Ben, because you know how fast he moves, that you ask those on Facebook, and we will get to those at about 40 minutes in, and you can keep asking those questions. So, Richard, how are we gonna? What's our format today in talking to Ben?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, it's great to be here again. We're so happy to have Ben back with us to give us some more insight into the props here at the festival. Today, we're going to watch a video that Ben and Marielle have shot previous to today. We're going to get a tour backstage. During the tour, please, like Michael said, please ask questions, anything you want to know or anything you see that you spot. They're like, ooh, I remember that, or where'd that come from, or any of those different types of questions. Please put those on Facebook, and we'll answer those once we get out of the video. After we finish up with the video, Ben and I are gonna, go through a few things. I have a few questions of my own, and then we'll get to your questions. So, hey, Ben, why don't you let us know what we're gonna talk about, what we're gonna see?
Yeah, so we recorded basically a tour of the prop shop, so showing you all the different spaces that we work in, showing you a couple of the really fun, cool tools that we use on occasion, and also there's a couple of things we're actually working on for next season already in the shop, and so we're going to show you a little bit of kind of how we're working on a couple of projects for some of the shows and stuff like that. And then
I have to tell you, this has been a dream that Ben and I have had for a number of years. We have wanted to take the backstage tour out here so that you can actually see this area. So kind of getting a sneak behind what wanted to do, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So let's do it. Roll them.
Technical difficulties from the
It'll come.
manager.
Yeah, we'll get
it. Here we go.
Hello, everybody. Ben Holman with the Utah Shakespeare Festival here, and today we're going to tour the prop shop. So come on. Turtle's here to greet us, as she is every day. This is our break room and our meeting room. So every morning when the staff gets here, we all get together and hang out here. And just like if you saw the warehouse tour a couple of weeks ago, we love to hold on to old things that aren't going to be in shows again, but that we really like. So we have posters and props. And we're going to head upstairs first to show you some fun stuff up there. So up here is where we mostly do a lot of our paper props, which is officially called ephemera. So newspapers, magazines, scrolls, letters, phone books, all that kind of stuff we create up here. So we have a lot of storage for those things on open shelving here and filing cabinets. We also have a huge research library. So we have books on paper props, on weapons, on different periods in history. We have old catalogs and magazines, books on art, scripts, furniture building, all that kind of stuff. We're constantly getting more books, so our research library is always expanding. A bunch of ephemera here needs to be put away. And then on this side of the room, we have all the stuff we need to make those paper props. So blank paper of different types, and different sizes, rolls of paper to go on our plotter, pens, pencils, markers, things to cut paper, all that kind of stuff. We have a computer up here that we use to do all the typing of those graphics and things like that. And lots of file cabinets full of stuff. Every drawer has something fun in it, and things. And then we have this room. the weapon storage. So all of our weapons that we use here at the festival are stored in this room. We buy most of them from weapons manufacturers, forges, so people hand make them for us. There's a company in New York that makes a lot of our steel weapons here, and we have a guy we've been working with for several years in Illinois who makes a lot of our aluminum weapons. When we get downstairs, we'll show you some weapons we had made for Pericles for next summer. But guns, swords, none of our weapons are real. They're not sharp. If they come sharp, we dull them down. We don't want to hurt any of our actors. And none of our guns are real guns. They are theatrical guns. At the most, they can fire blank ammunition, but they cannot have real ammunition put into them. Many of them are just dummy guns. You can't actually get any kind of ammunition in them. They're just for looks. So anyway, a lot of stuff in here, and every year we add new things to this room, and as the shows demand, depending on the type of shows we're doing and the weapons that we need for each show. And we have an inventory of all of this that we've done recently, so our designers can look at it before they get here and know what we have and what they can use. Lots of spears. So we have our own dye room. It's actually used for more than that. But we have an old soup kettle that we use as a dye vat. We have a washer and dryer. We also have a stove and oven in here. So all of our chemical mixing, all that kind of stuff happens in this room. So we can change the color of fabric or age or distress it or things like that. We also do a lot of paper distressing in there sometimes. We'll make fake money and throw it in the dryer with a wet towel to sort of soften it up and make it feel like it's been used for a long time instead of being crisp and brand new. Things like that. Coming this way, we have a bathroom. We call it our courtesy booth. And then this is our office. Marielle and I share the office, so the first desk you're going to see is Marielle's desk, and all the catalogs that we use are behind her desk. And then in the corner is my desk, which you can probably tell because of all the monkeys behind my desk. And Turtle is still hanging out with us. Yeah, so this is where all the brainstorm happens and stuff. This lamp was a donation. The rumor is it came from a brothel in Nevada, according to the person who gave it to us. But I just think it's really awesome, and so we use it in my office. So a lot of the staff eats lunch here every day. So we have a little kitchen area, microwaves, a toaster oven, and a fridge where they can store their food and cook and stuff. And this way, we have our soft goods room. So soft goods, which I think I talked about in the warehouse, anything fabric-based for a show. So upholstered furniture, curtains, banners, those kinds of things all happen in this room. We also do a lot of sewing for the scenery department as well in here. So we have a lot of our supplies all in labeled bins up here. This is kind of our tool area for this room. Sewing machines, we use industrial machines and home machines as well as sergers. A lot of fabric and trim is stored in here as well. We also have some storage containers outside that have some of that stuff stored in them as well. So one of the cool machines we get to use, not all the time, but every once in a while, is this Accuquilt machine. When we did the 2011 Midsummer Night's Dream that Fred directed for the 50th anniversary, they designed this huge willow tree, and the designer designed this shape for the leaves. And so we actually had a custom die made, which I'm going to run through the machine right now. Maybe. And if it worked, we have 3 leaves. And so this, we didn't use felt when we did the show. We did a much thinner material, and so we would stack 8 to 10 layers of fabric on here and run it through. So we'd get about 30 leaves per pass. We made somewhere between 40 and 50,000 leaves for that tree. So we spent a lot of time running through this machine. Since then, we've used this machine for several things. We actually, again, had a custom fleur-de-lis die made about 5 or 6 years ago that makes awesome fleur-de-lis. And these we actually ironed onto banners and then quilted on to make a bunch of banners for a show. We've bought a smaller fleur-de-lis. We did flowers for production of Winter's Tale that we hung on strings for the spring scene. In that show, we did hearts for production of Marvelous Wonderettes. So every once in a while, this. Oh, and last year we did leaves, red leaves, for the Scottish play. And stuff. So every once in a while, this machine comes in super handy and it's super fun, and then we take it apart and stack it in a corner until we need it the next time. So as we're leaving the soft goods room, this is Walter. He's our boarhead that was on a door in 39 steps. So this was the front of the door, and as you come through our meat curtain here, on the back of the door was Walter's butt. It was a visual joke. So this is our main shop area. It's kind of divided into basically sort of three main areas. This is what we call the craft area. So smaller things like floral is done over here. Our hot glue is stored over here. So small detailed things generally happen in this area. The flammables cabinets are full of our spray paints and our stains, things like that, glues, those kind of things. This is our paint area. In this corner, we do have a working sink over here. All of our paint is by color on shelves, brushes, all that kind of stuff. So try to use the space as efficiently as we can, make sure we have space to do all the things that we need to do as well. All the painting doesn't happen on this one table. This is where all the stuff is stored. Small projects may happen here, but then as needed, we'll move the stuff out to the different spaces. This wall is mostly our tools and hardware area. So all of our hand and power tools, are over here, labeled pretty well on the shelves. And then our hardware is the next section over, so all of our screws and staples and all that kind of stuff, along with specialty hardware. Each of our artisans normally gets a table to work at for the entire season. So we have 8 tables here in the middle of the shop, and they're all on wheels, so we can roll them around, put them together, move them out of the way if we have to build a large project like a bed or something like that. We started on a couple things for next year, which we'll show you as we kind of go through here. And as you look around, like there's stuff everywhere from previous shows. So we recently cleaned off this top shelf and brought some pieces over from the warehouse that I really love. There's some great things up here. I won't point them out because the camera's moving at a different speed than I am. And then the entire ceiling we've slowly over the years decorated with old banners, old photos from shows, and then prop pieces from shows as well. And again, probably won't ever get used in a show again, but are just really cool and fun to show off and stuff like that. So one of the things for Pericles, we're working a lot on Pericles right now in the shop, are all the weapons, which just recently came in. These are all aluminum weapons. They were made by a sword maker in Illinois. This is a trident, that this will actually be Pericles' weapon. And then we have a couple of cutlasses here. This is a Roman short sword. And a couple other weapons here as well. I'll pick them all up. But they're all aluminum, and as I said upstairs, they are not sharp at all. I mean, the width of this is a good 1/8 of an inch, if not more. So it's not going to hurt anybody, except for if you swing really hard. The force might break your skin or something, but you're not going to cut somebody with this. But it still requires a lot of rehearsal to make sure that they're used safely and stuff. So these are all for Pericles. The other big thing we're doing is at the beginning of Pericles, Turtle's helping out some more. At the beginning of Pericles, there's a scene where as Pericles is beginning his adventure, there's a rack of heads. Different people have tried to go on this quest before and have failed, and so they get decapitated and put on this rack. And so Apollo Weaver, our designer, has designed this really cool head rack, which we'll show you the design in just a minute. But we've cut out these pieces. This is half. There's an arch that someone can walk through. This is half of the arch. And there's some side panels that come out as well. And then each one of these pikes will actually have a head on it. And there's some additional pikes that swing out forward on this piece as well that will get added. And this will get aged and distressed and then painted to look like wrought iron, like hand wrought iron. So we've started on this, and it'll be a really cool piece in the show. This is in the opening part of Pericles. And then as we kind of continue around the shop here, this is kind of our main woodworking area. So we have our larger tools, drill press, bandsaw, chop saw, table saw, our large lumber rack, and our large loading garage door. So most of the raw material comes in this door, and then when things are finished, they also go out this door into our box truck to be transported to the theater. The other thing that we do, because we're doing so many different shows, is we have this shelf here that has laundry baskets. Normally there's a laundry basket in every spot, but we would use them to haul some other stuff around. So as things get finished for the show and need to go to rehearsal, they get dropped in the laundry basket. And then every day before rehearsal begins, Mario will load up the truck with all the stuff that needs to go to rehearsal that day, take all the laundry baskets with, drive it over to the theaters, drop it off to the rehearsal spaces, pick up anything that is no longer being used, it's dead, so it comes back to be put away, put back in storage, or if something has been broken and needs to be fixed, that'll come back on the truck as well. And so this is a good way to keep all the shows organized, to know what's going and what's coming and all that kind of stuff. And then this way, this is one of my favorite pieces that we built just a couple years ago. This is our Cuckoo Clock from the tavern a couple of falls ago. This whole thing was built in the shop out of found pieces mostly. The scenic artist actually carved the rabbit and the chicken that are on the sides there. The bag at the bottom is actually a felt bag we actually sewed. And then all the guns are actually plastic guns from Walmart that we found and painted. The deer head is actually a resin deer from Target. There's some 70s wall decor pieces in there. There's a couple of monkeys up top there. Some carved wood at the bottom. And the whole thing, it's actually a functioning clock. We need to change the battery, but we use it as one of the shop clocks. And then a duck popped out where the cuckoo was supposed to be and quacked during the show to tell us what time it was. Super fun project to put together. And then here on our whiteboard is that drawing of the head rack that I was telling you about, so you get a better idea of the arch here, and all the green circles represent the heads that'll be on it. And then you can see how the side panels come forward. This will provide visual interest as well as support for this piece because it's on the slip stage, so it'll ride out on the slip, be used for a scene, and then taken off and struck. So that's kind of one of the things we're working on right now here in the shop. So another cool machine we have in the shop, we don't use a whole lot, is this stencil cutting machine. I don't know how old it is, but it's a really fun machine. So you cut a piece of press board to the size you want your stencil to be, and you slide it into the machine, and you lock it down, which allows it to then move the paper. And you turn the wheel to whatever letter you want to start with, and you crank the handle, and then you just continue doing that while you spell out the words that you need. Turtle has joined us, because she's excited about this. And then when you're done, you slide it out, and you have a word. So this says props. We've done U.S. Army for crates, things like that. So super fun machine, sits on a shelf a lot of the time, but when we need it, we have a cool stencil cutting machine. So for Pirates of Penzance next summer, Act 2 takes place in sort of a family mausoleum. And so the set designer, Joe Winarski, has designed some tombstones that are used in Act 2. So this is her sort of rendering that she sent us. The basic shape is shown in white, and that's the shape we need to cut out. And the one next to it, and each one of them, is sort of the finished look of each one, with moss and lettering and stuff. And then they each have a little base so they can stand up on their own. But the actors move them around during the scene, hide behind them and stuff like that. So we want to keep them super lightweight. So instead of using wood as a base, which can be heavy, because these tombstones are about 2 feet by 4 feet, we decided to use all foam. So we're using 2 types of foam. The first foam is a dense foam called gator foam, and it's got a really dense center core and then like a hardboard on the outsides, which gives it a lot of structural integrity. So we'll cut the shape out of that first, and then we'll apply a layer of Styrofoam. This is just sort of generic Styrofoam. A lot of this came out of like packaging of things that have been shipped to us, props or things like that. So we hold on to all of this. Styrofoam comes in many different densities. So some of the Styrofoam you get in packaging has a lot of holes in it, and you can sort of see the individual beads of foam before they crush it. This is a really dense Styrofoam, so all the beads are really close together. So we apply this to the front of the gator foam, and then we can use chemicals to sort of eat away at the Styrofoam to give it an aged and distressed look. So this is a tombstone that we built for Great Expectations, the musical, a number of years ago. And you can see by putting chemicals on it, it eats away the foam in a really cool way to make it look like it's stone that's been eaten away and weathered away by wind and water and being out in the weather a whole lot. And so we'll do this to the Styrofoam. Turtle is making me lose my concentration. We'll do this to the Styrofoam and then paint it, age it, add all the lettering and the moss to give us a really cool looking tombstone that can be used for Act 2 of Pirates of Penzance next summer. So come and see that. So another one of our fun tools we have is this rind picking machine. It's used by florists to add a little metal spike to the end of fake flowers to put into flower arrangements. So you basically cut your flowers to the length you need, and then you place them in this machine. I've already got one pick going, but I'll do another one in a second. And then you crank down, and it actually pinches this metal tab around the end of the flower, so you can jam it into floral foam or something like that. So we're going to try doing it again. So this first movement should slide a pick forward. Sometimes it gets jammed up. There we go. Then you lay your flower in place, you clamp down, and you pull the stem out, and there you go. So you have a little spike to go into floral foam. And you can do that over and over and over. We have done it a ton. We did Three Musketeers who made some giant hedges. We built them out of plywood and foam. They were supposed to be boxwood hedges, and then we ended up doing little boxwood picks and did this picking machine on each one of those little picks, and we're able to then make the big boxwood hedge. We also used it on some boxwood for the lyre a couple falls ago and made a statue of Cupid. That was supposed to be totally out of boxwood, and we did the same thing. So our rind picking machine makes little floral picks so we can jab into foam, and makes it so that our flowers look lovely. So we have so much stuff that the warehouse and the shop don't contain it all. So we have a couple of shipping containers outside of our shop. This one is referred to as container 1 because it's the first one. And in here we have a lot of fabric storage, really large bolts of fabric, and then all of our picture frames. And we just recently finished an inventory of all of our frames. So every frame has a tag on it now. It has a number, the frame size, the artwork size, and the other information for us. And then this is all in a computer database, so designers can go through and sort of pick the frames that they want to use, and we can come out and pull them and have them ready to go. So we have lots and lots. I think we have over 800 picture frames that we've just inventoried. Medium-sized bolts of fabric, so upholstery size 54-inch and 45-inch bolts live out here. We'll come out and grab them, use them in the soft goods room, and then bring them back out. And then baskets. Shockingly, the Shakespeare Festival uses lots of baskets, and we have a lot of baskets. We're still in the process of organizing all of the baskets. We just cleaned them up and reduced the quantity by about 10 or 15%. But there's probably, we haven't counted them yet, I'm guessing 300, 350 baskets in this container. So there's container 1, fabric, baskets, and frames. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but they're large quantities. We need somewhere to put them, so they're in container 1. On to container 2. So this is container 2. If you've ever heard me in my seminar talk about the Frou-Frou A Go-Go container, this is it. This is where most of our cool stuff is stored. So on the right, the first couple shelves here are all special effects. So everything from bike brake cables to water effects, pumps, pyro cannons, smoke machines, all that kind of stuff lives here. On the right side is all of our upholstery foam that we'll either pull out of old furniture and reuse, or buy new and cut up and use. And if we can recycle that multiple times through multiple shows, we'll do that. Then we get into finials of all different types in these bins here. Won't point them out, but we have lots and lots of wood and plastic finials. And then we get into furniture legs and arms. So we can come out here and pull individual pieces and put them together to make a new piece of furniture. And then we just go into bins and bins of all kinds of things. Corks and bells, candle parts. Here are rose petals and confetti that we drop from the sky on occasion in different shows. Treasure coins and treasure jewels, crystals for chandeliers, all kinds of lamp parts. We reuse lamp parts to make all kinds of things out of them. So we have all kinds of, we tear apart lamps all the time and use those. Beads. And then we apply things to give us texture and depth to our props. So we have a whole section that is just the texture section. So medium, large, small applique pieces, rings, seashells. It just goes on and on. There's a whole bin of mirror balls, letters, textured wallpaper. It just goes on and on. Here's twine, cannonballs. We have a whole bin of, they're basically styrofoam balls. We use them as cannonballs in a production of Pirates of Penzance many years ago. Backer rod. This is a foam rod that's used for insulation in windows and things like that. We have all different sizes of it that we use. We apply it as a decorative texture. We use it to fill things, to make vines, all kinds of different things. Here's a bunch of textural woven things. So we have actual woven material, plastic material that mimics that, those kinds of things. Then we have our large section. So these are large pieces of lamps, or turn pieces that we've found or made that we can, again, repurpose, put together in multiple ways to make a larger prop out of it. Radio components. When we did South Pacific, we had to make a whole radio, World War II radio, and so we used parts of these and put them together to make a radio. Some more legs and parts down here, mostly for furniture construction, and then additional foam of different types, EVA foam and other kinds of foams for different purposes here as well. So tons of stuff in container 2. Probably at least once a day in the shop you hear somebody say, it's probably in container 2, and somebody has to come out here and dig around and find it, which is why all the labeling and stuff really helps. This is our trim container. Many years ago, a lady in Las Vegas donated, she bought a building, and it was an old curtain manufacturing place. She went in and it was full of trims and fabrics and things. So we went down with a 24-foot box truck and hauled back a truck full of stuff. And we've been using it for multiple years, and this is what's left. So we recently just cleaned this all out and reorganized it by color and type. So we have blue gips, and then we have blue tassel-y stuff, and fringe, and all kinds of different things. And designers can come in here, find the color they want, find the style they want. Here's what's got little tassels attached to them. Then we have ball fringy kind of stuff up on top. We also have bins and bins and bins of tassels of almost every color imaginable. So again, just by color, by style, by type. If a designer can't find something in here that'll work for the show, that would be amazing to me. Because we have so many options, so many colors, lots of stuff from the 70s and 80s, like original trim that you can't get anymore. The companies don't make it. And we have spools and spools and spools of it, which is super awesome. And then back here at the end, we have multicolor. So things that aren't just a single color, but multicolor. These are very useful, especially when you're doing a Victorian show and you need to tie in different colors and things like that. And then over here, we get into our whites, our golds, our browns, our silvers, our metallics, things like that. And then a couple of bolts that are much larger, have a lot more volume. Most of these are probably 20-yard bolts. These are probably 50 or 100-yard bolts. So a lot more quantities when you make something that has a lot of trim on it or something. That's available here as well. And then some bins of scarves and stuff that we use as texture, as well as a lot more ball fringe. We use a lot for like our Playmakers shows, our kids shows and stuff like that. And some space to expand. I mean, we're going to use this up, maybe use this for other storage, but a lot of cool stuff in here. And then we have a little space in the front here. So we do a lot of recycling at the festival. Almost all of our cardboard boxes and paper that we use end up getting recycled. So we're currently using the front of this as our sort of recycling spot. We load it all up here until we get a truck full and then take it and get it recycled. So those are all the containers.
Thanks for taking a little time today to watch the tour of the prop shop. I hope you learned a little about kind of what we do and some of the things that we use, and saw some cool stuff that's going on for next season. And hopefully we'll catch you again in another video in the future.
Wow. So much stuff.
I know, and I talk so fast.
Oh my goodness. And Turtle had plenty to add.
Oh, yes, she did.
Always appreciate it. Well, I mean, there's just there's so many things to talk about. I don't even know where to start, but I do want to remind everyone on Facebook to put questions up, because I know after seeing that stuff, I certainly have some new questions. So please add comments in the add Facebook on the Facebook page. Give us some questions so we can answer them here for you. But I have one I want to start with, because I know from previous experience that this hasn't always been your home. The prop shop has been in a variety of different locations. Can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of where props have been made for the festival before?
Yes. So when I started in 1994, there were two separate prop shops that both worked out of the basements, one in the University Auditorium, which served the Adams Theater, and one in the Randall Jones basement that served the Randall Theater. And so it was two separate staffs, each working in their own shops with their own tools. We did large construction projects upstairs with the carpenters who used the upstairs spaces in both of those venues. And that was for the first probably 5 or 6 years I worked here. And then in 1999, we started doing a fall season and needed somewhere to build. And so we had a storage building called Gower that we had stored stuff in for years. We cleaned that out, got some additional storage, and turned that into a working shop for the scene shop and the prop shop to build the fall shows. We were both out there for a couple of years. In 2000, it became the prop shop, and we combined both the shops into one space. Scenery continued to build out there in the fall. until about 2003, I think. And then we bought the Bulldog property at that point, and Scenery started building out here, and we used most of the rest of the space for storage of things. And the prop shop stayed at the Gower building until 2008, I believe. And then we basically expanded the Bulldog shop to include props. And so the summer of 2009 really was our first year out here. And then we built a warehouse in 2011 and filled that. So this is my third shop in 27 years here.
And it looks like you're about full on this one too, huh?
Yeah. So having the containers really helps us have extra space to store supplies and stuff. We like to reuse stuff as much as if something breaks in the warehouse, we'll save all the parts to reuse in something else.
Yeah, definitely. Props is the ultimate recycler, it feels like, of the theater. Always can find a new use for something, which is great. You talked a little bit, you walked us around a lot about where tools are and sort of, some of the spaces, but how did you figure out where things were going to go? Like what was like, oh, I'm going to put weapons here, I'm going to put the small craft area over here. What led you to those decisions?
I think a lot of it is between the three spaces here over the years, and also working at like Actors Theater and stuff, where I worked seasonally before I came out here full time. You see how different shops work and how the flow kind of works. And so the main shop area where the craft and painting and carpentry spaces are, that existed. The office space and the soft goods and the dye room and upstairs, we added that to the building. And so I got a lot of say in like how big those spaces needed to be and kind of how they would work and stuff. So just kind of from the years of experience of knowing how things work here and how big a pieces we upholster and stuff, I needed double doors going into the soft goods room, because a single door, even a 36-inch wide door, I couldn't get certain couches and stuff into that space to work on them. So putting in double doors, we don't open them often. Most of the time we only use one, but when you need to get a big piece in there, the double doors really help, that kind of stuff. So it's mostly just experience over the years, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, as someone who ran a few shops in my time and just even thinking about like, what am I going to do in my garage? Am I going to turn this into a shop space? Trying to figure out how to approach creating a shop or laying out tools or things like that. Do you have things, I mean, you kind of talked about a little bit like doorways, things like that. Are there big like considerations for someone who, whether they're doing props or scenery or, it's your shed in the backyard that you want to turn into a small shop? What are some things you could recommend for somebody to take into consideration when they're thinking about how do I set up a space that I can work in to build things?
Right. The biggest thing is think about workflow. So where your material is coming from, how it's getting into the space, how you're manipulating it. Are you cutting it? Are you like, what's the processes you're going to go through with those things? And then do you have to store them once they're complete, or can they leave and go to another location once they're complete? Do you need to worry about keeping them clean? Those kinds of things. So workflow is kind of the biggest one. So how material comes in, how you store it, how you use it, and then where it goes once you're done with it. That would be number one. The second would just be thinking about as much dust control as you can manage. So if you can get vacuums on your tools so you don't have a lot of dust in the air and that kind of stuff, and it'll keep the things clean as you're working on them, so you don't spend lots of time having to wipe them down or those kinds of things. Those are probably the two biggest, is workflow and sort of dust management would be the two things I would think about the most in sort of setting up a space.
Yeah, and especially when you have mixed use spaces like you have in props, where you've got soft goods maybe working right next to or very close in proximity to someone who's having to use a table saw. And what does that mean? It's a really big, really important point. I want to grab a question actually that we got, because we talked about it earlier. Laura asked us what percentage of materials used per show is recycled versus new. Do you have a sense?
Sort of. What I always say is, like, as far as like our actual props, in any given season, so over the course of 8 or 9 shows in a season, about 15 to 20% are brand new. We buy them. We then manipulate them in some way to make them appropriate for the show. About 15 to 20% are built from scratch. So we buy raw materials and actually create the piece from scratch, either because we can't afford the real thing, it doesn't exist in the world, or the designer has designed it in such a specific way that it has to be created because we can't find anything similar. And then about 60% is pulled from the warehouse. Again, almost everything that comes out of the warehouse gets repainted, reupholstered, modified in some way. It's very rare that we're like, oh, that thing is perfect, just put it on stage. Like, it almost never happens. So it generally breaks down 60, 20, 20 in any given season. Of those things we build from scratch, almost all of them use at least some materials that we have on hand. So either from the frou-frou a go-go container, we'll go pull a set of legs, buy plywood to make the top, maybe buy some new trim for the edge of the table, that kind of thing. Or if we're reupholstering, we may go find a bolt of fabric that we have 5 yards left on that's enough for the 2 chairs instead of buying a new fabric or whatever. Because our budgets they're not tiny, but they're not large for the amount of stuff that we're producing. So being able to have those resources locally or in the shop to be able to go, oh, we have a piece of plywood left over from last year. Let's use that for the base of this piece. We don't have to spend money on that. We can spend money on the finish or those kinds of things. So.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to me, or when I first started doing theater, how much it gets designed, but it evolves over time. So like you may, this 20% you build and the 20% you buy, or in the 60% you pull. It's not like today we figured out the design and then you just produce it and it never changes throughout the process. Can you talk about like how that evolves, and specifically about like how having these resources and props allows the creative process to maybe have more flexibility than in other situations?
Yeah, like in the prop world in particular, I think that's true, because you're not like in scenery, you kind of have to figure out how many stairs you're going to have going from the first floor to the second floor, where the doors are going to be so they can block the show. But once you get the actors in the room and they start working with the director about the scene and their character and how their character would react to things, we get lots of requests on any given day. If we have 4 shows in rehearsal, we may get anywhere from 5 to 30 notes coming out of rehearsal. And they can be, we would like to add a book for this character, or we would like to make the book bigger, or the book's the wrong color, or whatever, and all the detail work to make sure that each of the props that the actors touch and deal with are like perfect. And so we get every single day, we have modifications to things that we think are the show prop, and they get them in rehearsal and realize, oh, it's not, the book isn't going to fit in the pouch that they got from costumes. So the book has to be a different size to fit in the pouch, or those kinds of things. And working with the actors to make sure that they're comfortable with the piece, that it works for their character. It works for them physically in the action that because it's like 2 parts. It's like, does this work as a character prop for you to help tell the story of your character? Does it propel the story of the play forward? And does it physically work for you as an actor playing this character to do the things that you need to do to tell the story correctly? So it's like every prop has like 3 levels that we sort of have to work with. We're responding directly to actor concerns, to director concerns, and then also designer concerns. The nice thing is that a lot of our designers, the first year, they tend to send us really detailed information and really complete information. And then we kind of get through a season and they're like, oh, you guys kind of understand what you're doing and kind of understand everything. And so the amount of information we get from them tends to be a little less after that. And they give us a little more freedom. Like when Joe sent us that beautiful rendering of those tombstones, she included a note that said, this is the basic idea, but feel free to interpret and, add a little bit of, your own little sort of propness to them to make them fit into the world of the play. It's kind of fun in props. Scenery is very much like architects or engineers building an architect's drawing. It has to be very much like what it is. And in props, it's like, well, can we substitute this piece of trim for that piece of trim because we have it, or they'll save us some time, or can we adjust this thing or whatever? And generally most designers are like, yeah, as long as it gets the feel of what I design, I'm totally cool with that. So.
It's been a theme a lot through these seminars that as we've talked to different artists, designers, directors, actors. We keep coming back to this theme that I think is so important, is that the work evolves. Every time you add a new artist or artisan to the process, they're adding a piece of themselves. They're adding a piece of their artistry and their perspective to it. And this collective that is the theater makes it such a unique art form. And props is is a perfect example of that. Just like you described with Jo and her rendering, the thing that she designs, it actually elevates the work as you add the artisan to it, as the actor interacts with it, as the director sees how it plays. All these things really just make all of those moments that much greater. And I think this discussion in particular, and just talking about this really hit home for me on that, that all these different people come together to make something so much better. And it kind of leads me to a question here from Michael. How many prop artisans are on your crew during a normal season? Like, how many people work in your shop?
Yeah, during a normal season, my shop has ranged, in my 27 years here, has ranged anywhere from a high of 18. When we also did the display department, we kind of used everybody to do all that stuff, props and display. So as high as 18 to as low as, including Marielle and I think we've been as low as 10. And that includes some interns who start in our shop and then run the shows. So we have anywhere between 4 and 8 like full prop artisans who are basically in the shop building for the entire 8 weeks of our build is typically 8 weeks. We start about the same time the actors start, and our staff generally leaves like right after the shows open. So it's generally about 8 weeks, and we have generally 6 to 8 people building during that entire time.
Great. And sort of how do you break up the work? So, props is different than other groups, but like how does it get processed? What are some of the different positions, and what do they do?
Right. So we have prop carpenters who basically work in wood and metal and build like the basic structures for furniture and those kinds of things. We have generally 1 or 2 soft goods artisans. So they're doing most of the upholstery work as well as any kind of curtains or banners or anything dealing with fabric. And then we'll generally have either like a prop painter who's really good at like faux wood graining and those kind of things and can do all the finish work on all the pieces as well as staining of the furniture. And then also like a craft artisan. And craft artisans generally deal with a lot of the hand props. Like if we have to recover books with leather or make flower arrangements or those kinds of, things you would go to Joann's and buy the supplies for and throw something together like for your house or something, that would be a general craft artisan. And depending on the season, if we know early enough, we can like, we're building lots of furniture this year, so we can hire 3 prop carpenters. There's not a lot of sewing this year, so we can have 1 less soft goods artisan. We also tend to find that a lot of schools now, particularly in grad school, are teaching their artisans a little bit of all of those skills, giving them a little more well-rounded, maybe not as much detail in one area, but a well-rounded artisan, because a lot of theaters have smaller staffs than they used to. And so they can't have dedicated artisans for each of those things. They have to have a general artisan who can do all of those things a little bit. So we also like to sort of push our artisans and ask them, early on, like, is there a skill you want to learn that you don't feel really good about? And we'll maybe pair them with somebody who has really good skills in that area and give them a chance to work on a project to build that skill a little bit while they're here. Getting the shows finished is always paramount, but if we can teach and give them some additional experiences that help them in their career, it helps us to hire them back in the future because they're more skilled, and also helps them get jobs out in the world. So we try to do that as well.
Great. And this leads perfectly into Dan and Tanya's question. What kinds of skills do you need to be a successful props artisan? And do you think it's better to specialize or to be general? You kind of answered that, but
yeah, I think a little bit of generalization. If there's something you really like, make sure you have some good examples of that and sort of push that. Like I'm a really good painter, but I hate doing it. So I don't tell people that I can paint because I just
know.
But and then as far as skills, the biggest, in my opinion, and what I always look for is a good personality and creativity / imagination. Because I probably have somebody in my shop who can teach you how to use the lathe or how to stitch this particular stitch for this banner or whatever. So the actual specific skills are less important to me than the ability to be able to look at a pile of junk and see within it a beautiful, Victorian mirror or something like that. And also be able to, we work really fast and in a fairly small space. When you think about having 10 or 12 people in this shop, you don't have a lot of personal space. So being able to get along with people, having a good personality, a little bit of a sense of humor, because sometimes the hours get long, the pressure is always high. So I can teach you a skill. I can't teach you how to be a human being. So those skills are really important to me when I'm hiring. But start young, learn as much as you can. There's so much stuff online now as far as teaching you skills. We decided a couple of years ago we needed a ceramic vase for Mary Poppins that they broke every night. And we'd never made ceramics before. And so I looked into buying, greenware, and it was really expensive. But I could buy a mold for like $50 and I could make them. So I watched a YouTube video. We bought some ceramic slip and we did a test like in March before the season started, and we're like, hey, this isn't actually that hard. And so we just had an artisan every morning. She made 3 vases, left them to dry for a week. So every day she was making more vases, and it was inexpensive, but we literally like watched a 10-minute YouTube video and figured it out. So constantly just picking up skills and learning. No skill is not useful in props.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And now that YouTube's around and we can YouTube video watch those things, what are some research techniques you have? Like you said, you go to YouTube, you Google it, and you go, I want to learn how to do this thing. Is that primary research for most of the stuff you do? What else do you do?
A lot. I mean, I still love books and catalogs. They're a little more vetted, I guess, because they've gone through an editor and all those kinds of things, whereas anybody can put anything on the internet. So like I said, we have a huge research library upstairs that we dip into all the time. Marielle has hundreds of catalogs that we'll flip through. Because also, if you go to the internet, you kind of have to have an idea of what you're looking for and type it in. So if you go to a company's website, and you need confetti, you're gonna type in confetti. But flipping through a catalog, you like the page across from confetti, might have this amazing product that you hadn't even thought about using for some other project. And it sort of sparks some imagination. Oh, that would solve this other problem or whatever. So I kind of love the physicalness of paper still. I'm still kind of old school in that way. But we do a lot of internet research. We spend a lot of time. Our designers do research. Our dramaturgs do some research for us on occasion if we need. The directors will sometimes send us some research. But we still do a lot of research to make sure, is that period appropriate? Did that thing exist when this play occurs? Or is it going to be anachronistic and someone's going to write us a letter saying, you used the wrong rifle in Les Mis. That kind of rifle didn't exist. And it's like, we did the best we could. We couldn't afford the real ones or, whatever. But so we do a lot of internet research as well. So any source we can find that helps us. Again, it's all about telling the story and our little part of making sure that the story comes through clear and the message of the story comes through clear. And if a prop sort of messes with that, that's terrible. And so we try to avoid that as much as we can.
One of the things that you mentioned about artisan skills and being a prop person was the ability to look at a pile of stuff and see, the end goal out of just this pile of stuff. How, like Joe's rendering, just to go back to the example, or the drawing that Apollo did, is how often do you actually get that much information? How much of your work is sort of generated from the artisan and from you and conversations versus sort of, here, make this?
Yeah. So I would say we get drawings, very detailed, like measured architectural kind of drawings, probably 10% of the time. More so with a first-year designer, like I said before. Joe will often send like research pictures, like she'll send a picture of a desk and say, make this about 4 feet long. And we basically give that to the artisan and go start digging around through container 2, finding some legs, finding some parts. We'll then photograph all that stuff, send it back to Joe and say, if we go this direction and use these legs, does this work for you or whatever? Or can we modify this piece out of stock? Like we have this Egyptian chaise that we built for Antony and Cleopatra like 15 years ago. We've never used it since. And Apollo designed a bed for Pericles next year. And he used the exact same research image that the designer 12 years ago used for the Antony and Cleopatra chaise. And they both modified that research image a little bit in their sort of drafting to us. And I said to Apollo, I said, well, since you used the exact same research image and I have this thing, can we modify it to get closer to your dimensions and add your details to it, but reuse that piece instead of starting from scratch? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So we took some measurements and some photos, and he's doing he's basically drawing on the photo the modifications he wants us to do or whatever. So a lot of the times, once the designers get to know us, it's a lot of, here's the general idea, here's the general look. Before you go headlong into it, kind of let me know what you're thinking. But a lot of it is a lot of creativity and freedom for the artisans to be able to go in and play a little bit and add their artistry to the piece. Again, help tell that story.
Yeah, that's awesome. Janet asks us, do your props also get used for SUU productions or high school, local youth theater, community theater productions? How else do you interact with the sort of larger theater community?
Yes. So we do, because we're part of SUU, and SUU is part of the festival, the theater, arts and dance department. We have a really good working relationship with them. And so they will often come out and borrow things from us for their shows. Every once in a while we get really sucked in, like last year with their spring musical, Legally Blonde. We ended up going over and helping do a lot of set dressing the last couple of days because it was just a really big show. And their prop master for that show actually works for us part-time. And so we went over and kind of helped her make sure all the stuff got done. So we use a lot, SU uses a lot of our stuff because we have such a wide stock. And then we rent at a really reasonable rate, I think, to local high schools, to the community theater. Almost every show they do, someone comes out and borrows some stuff from us. And we do a lot with Cedar and Canyon View. We also do a little bit in the wider community. We do stuff to St. George every once in a while. A school up in Davis County borrowed a bunch of our stuff rented a bunch of stuff from our Joseph production for a production of Joseph that they did. Yes, we try to give them a really reasonable rate and allow them to use stuff from our stock.
If there is a teacher out there who's a drama teacher or someone who's working with a theatrical program, how should they, or how would you like them to contact you about, if there's a relationship they can make there? Is there a way they can do that?
The easiest way is through our website. There's a contact us, and I believe I'm listed in there with my email, and just send me an email. And then there's a process there's a form they have to fill out, dates and what they need and that kind of stuff. And then we go through a process of approval, and then we arrange a time for them to come look at our stock and figure out what they need and that kind of stuff. So
cool. I wanted to shift back a little bit to the shop, and we got to see some really cool tools and some stuff that 60, 70-year-old tools, stuff that still really works well. Of all those, do you have a favorite? Do you have one you like to use the most?
We have a thing called a cut-all, which is a really old school. It's kind of a cross between a jigsaw and a scroll saw, but it's portable. And they're even hard to find parts for. The guy that we've been buying parts from forever went out of business last year. And so we bought a ton of extra blades and the cutting oil and all kinds of replacement parts from him. It's like probably a 12-inch by 8-inch by probably 10-inch tall, big boxy thing. And it's got two little handles on the front, and you can use your thumbs to basically manipulate the blade to turn it side to side. And you can do really intricate cutting on wood and plastics and stuff. So the cut-all is probably one of my favorites, and we again don't use it all the time like the other tools I showed in the video, but when I pull that out and show a 20-year-old, hey, you should use the cut-all on that. What's that? And I pull it out and start like, this is really cool.
It's like a video game.
Yeah, exactly. So I love the cut-all. Oh, and here comes Mario with
nice.
Cammy back.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the cut-all. So this is how you spin the blade right here, and these are the handles. It's just awesome. So yeah, I love my K11 cut-all. I'm greasy.
So that's your favorite. What's the one you just can't live without? What's the tool that you have to have in your shop?
Oh geez, all of them.
Right.
I don't know. They're all so great.
Is there one you use more often? Like, what's is there something you're like every day?
Screw guns. We use screw guns every single day. I use my computer every single day between research and drafting and making lists, checking lists, responding to emails from stage managers. We used to have a fax machine, and all the reports would come in the middle of the night on the fax machine. We'd get it in the morning. It'd be the stack of paper. We'd have to look at it all and then call and leave answering machine messages for the stage manager about notes if we had questions or things like that, and now we immediately can respond in emails and that kind of stuff. But so I would, the computer and probably just a drill screw gun are probably the things that we touch every single day.
Yeah. How did we do it when rehearsal reports came out on paper?
Gosh.
And
I have no, I remember before we had credit cards at the festival, and you would call somebody and order something and how much is it going to be? And they'd say, oh, it's going to be $12.11. And we'd have to call campus and get a check cut. And the check would come up 3 days later, and we'd put it in an envelope and we'd mail it off to the company, and they'd finally receive it and they'd box the stuff up and they would ship it to us. We still did all that in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how did we ever get a show open? Now we're like, what do you mean they can't be here tomorrow? here's my credit card number. I will pay for overnight shipping, and it happens. I don't know how we ever got shows open 20 years ago here. But yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. We're getting close to time, but I wanted to say I had one place I wanted to go back to, because to me, your armory is one of the most impressive things, like the number of weapons, the number of different swords and edged weapons that you have. But one thing, that always was surprising to me was just like the maintenance on those. These beautiful weapons, they start out wonderfully, and especially with aluminum and things. What do you do to take care of that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
What is that like?
So we train our prop interns who actually run the shows to do weapons maintenance. So after every single performance where weapons are used, they check every single blade for nicks or damage to the blade, and we train them. And aluminum and steel are very different. So steel has a procedure that you go through, and then aluminum has a different procedure that you go through. The main idea is you want to remove as little of the material as possible, so maintain as much of the metal or wood or whatever the weapon is made out of as possible whenever you do the repairs or the cleaning of them. But you also want to make it really safe for the actors. So you don't want any kind of nick or gouge that could catch another weapon and cause the actors, because they're trained, they literally have before every show a fight call where they go through every single motion of every single fight. And so they know exactly when they're going to hit, how far down the blade they slide, all that kind of stuff is choreographed by a fight choreographer for every single fight you see. And if there's any damage to the weapon that doesn't allow them to complete those movements, that's when people get hurt. And more damage occurs either to the weapon or to the set or to another performer or whatever. So our job is to keep them as clean and as damage free to allow for the fights to be consistent and for no damage or actions to occur. So there's a lengthy process. I won't go into all of it, but we have little weapons maintenance kits, and we train the crew to maintain them. And if they ever have a huge issue, we'll go over and look at it. We also typically try to have some backup weapons in the boxes. So if we actually do have like a sword break, which is a rare occurrence, I think maybe 2 or 3 times in my 27 years, we've actually had a blade break on stage that wasn't supposed to break. Because sometimes they're supposed to. But we tend to have an extra weapon in the box so that if that were to happen, the performer could go and grab another weapon and continue the show. We don't want to ever, have something happen that allows us to have to stop the show.
Yeah, exactly. As we're wrapping up here, I wanted to just, I want to talk a little bit just about donations, because I think, we really point out that you recycle everything. Even if an item comes in a certain way, you may manipulate it. Like, the pieces from chandeliers could become a billion different things. Just that clock alone, how many different things were repurposed to make that clock? How do you interact with folks? How can folks help if they have something they really like, they hope they can donate it, maybe it has a second life? What's a way that they can sort of support the process of maybe having their items have a second life on stage?
Absolutely. We love donations. The one thing I will say is we are not a museum. So your piece may have historical significance to you and your family, and I totally appreciate that. And we will take care of it, but we will reupholster it, we will restain it, we will make it work for the show that it's going to be in. So we're not going to preserve it in exactly the condition that you gave it to us in. We're not going to tell the designer, you can never reupholster this or whatever. But more than likely, it will get used in multiple shows until it literally falls apart. And then we'll take all the components and put them in a container too, and we'll manipulate them into something else, and they'll still be on stage for years and years after that. It's you can get a tax deduction letter. You tell us the value of the items. Our development department will get you a letter. So if you want to write it off on your taxes, you can. And we will inventory it and put it in stock, and it will end up either in total or in parts on stage in a future production.
Awesome. Thank you. And one last question, and one that I've always really wanted to know. Patrick asks, Ben, what is it like to be so awesome?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. This is my job. There are days, I know and often people are like, man, you must love your job. I was like, so, it's a really cool job. I get to wear dirty clothes every day. I get to play. get to make stuff for fake people. There are days when it feels like it's the end of the world if we don't get it right, but it's not. It's not rocket science. It's not world peace. We're just telling stories. Those stories can be important. They can have meaning to people. They can move people. They can change lives, and that's important to an extent. The job is super fun. The job can also be super, super stressful because the amount of work we're trying to do in the period of time that we have to do it, and everybody wants their story to be perfect and right, and every single detail to be correct. And so you're answering to directors and designers and producers because of budget and timelines and artisans. And so like when we get to tech, it's like, it feels like everything is like the end of the world if it doesn't get done right. And those weeks can be really, really frustrating and challenging. But getting through those and getting to previews and openings and standing at the back of the house and watching people come out of the theater and have that emotional connection to the show in some way, it makes it all worth it. I go home and try to sleep for like a week after we get all the shows open in the summer. I almost always get sick because the adrenaline kicks in and gets me through the tech process. And then my body crashes and I always get sick in July. But knowing that we can get to that point and tell those stories in a way that affects our audience and allows them to have that emotional connection to the story, hundreds of years old, 20 days old if we're doing a new play, whatever, makes it all worth it. And so that's the awesome part of the job, and that's what I sort of thrive on, which is why it comes across that I really love this job, because I do. I love telling people stories and contributing what I can, my artistry to those stories. I hope that answers your question, Patrick.
Yeah, well, we are so lucky to have you, Ben, and I'm so lucky that I get to work with you every day. I'm thankful we get to have this conversation, and I'm thankful that we have the future shows to plan together and to work on and to tell stories together. And I want to thank all our listeners and our patrons out there today who tuned in. We love telling these stories. We love staying connected with you, and we are so happy that we're able to bring these to you. I want to let you know that next week, we are adjusting our schedule slightly. So tune in next week on Thursday at 11 a.m. From now on, we'll be doing weekly seminars at 11 a.m. on Thursdays. So tune in next week. We're going to speak to the folks who produce The Green Show. So we're going to have a group of people who, some of the actors, directors, former actors and performers, and we're going to talk with that great group of people. And I also want to thank our wonderful sponsors, the Cedar City Bryan Head Tourism Bureau. Thank you for being there for us. Thank you for allowing us to bring this content to our patrons and to our audience. And we can't wait to see you next time, and have a great day.